A gente tem a honra de receber hoje o professor Martti Rousi. Ele é um cellista fantástico, que começou a carreira dele como um dos vencedores do Prêmio Tchaikovsky em 86, e de lá para cá tem sido banca de vários concursos internacionais, tem tido uma grande carreira como solista e músico de câmara, e também tem formado alunos que têm sido vencedores de concursos internacionais, como o Jonathan Roseman, por exemplo. Então, acho que é uma oportunidade. Essas lives têm essa coisa de bacana que a gente nunca fez antes, que às vezes um aluno que está na Bahia, um jovem profissional que está no Paraná, pode fazer uma pergunta para um grande mestre, como é o caso do Martti. So, Martti, just basically what I said, that you're a wonderful, wonderful cellist and pedagogue. And
thank you very much. You are very kind.
And that not only you have a great career as a soloist, as a chamber musician, but also you've made some of the great new generation cellists in Finland, and people from all over the world come to study with you. And what I said with these lives is very interesting, because sometimes a student in Brazil can ask a direct question to a cellist like you, and that would not be possible without the technology. So thank you very much, Martti, for being so nice. Kiitos. And
obrigado.
And the first question that I have for you is that I'm always amazed by the level of cello playing in Finland. And in Brazil, we know some of the most famous names, but how come Finland has, it's not a very big country, and how come it has such a big cello tradition and such a standard that is as high as Germany or France, or why do you consider that to happen?
Well, I don't think there's like a big secret there. This tradition of playing cello in Finland has been there for quite a long time already. There have been some really top cellists already in 1930s, 40s, 50s, and it's kind of like a continuation of that. And I think also somehow the character of this kind of like northern country, where it's like there's a long dark winter where there's nothing else to do than practice, and you get kind of that kind of stamina. Also, maybe it can help in some ways, but I think it's mostly this kind of tradition that has been there and that has never sort of stopped going on, and I hope to be part of this.
And do you think that the proximity to like St. Petersburg and all the Russian tradition influences the Finnish school?
Well, I don't know if there are such things like schools anymore so much, but of course this influence that we are between East and West, it does matter. And we can get kind of like some benefits from that. If you look at the European map and see what is between East and West, there is Vienna, Berlin, there is Budapest, and this kind of city, also Helsinki, which is kind of well situated for music in many ways. But I'm not saying that there's something wrong with London or Paris or something like that, but we certainly benefit from that. Let's say we have a younger culture in many ways than some other countries, but still we have some deep roots, and we have our composer heroes like Sibelius, and before Sibelius already there were like some major Finnish musicians and composers who traveled the world. So if you go to like classical or baroque time, there were already some major composers. So it's like, I think it's like also because it's not a big country, so you have to somehow respect those traditions, or you cannot just take 100 people and let 99 be destroyed and then just take care of that one. But you have to take care of everyone. Maybe that's the Finnish way of education.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And the second question that I have before people start asking questions, and pessoal, vocês podem botar suas perguntas aí. There are many. There's such a big school of composition in Finland, and down here in the southern hemisphere, we get to know Sariaho, and I think that Yo-Yo just premiered a Finnish concerto a few years ago also.
Esa-Pekka Salon concerto, that's true.
Yeah, yes. And what are other composers that have been writing in Finland that we should look for, Martti?
Well, of course, this modern music the contemporary music is very strong here. You mentioned already good names, and then Magnus Lindberg is one composer who has written a lot for cello. He has written a partita in 6 movements, like with titles like Coranto, like Courant, and like there are these kind of classic movements of a partita. Start with the sinfonia, and there's an aria as a slow moment. That's a wonderful piece. It's a very tricky piece, but very good, kind of a modern classic. And then, of course, there are these composers like Aulis Sallinen and Joonas Kokkonen who wrote beautiful music for cello. Kokkonen has a very good cello concerto. Aulis Sallinen has this chamber concerto, which is very popular, called Don Juan Quixote, with string orchestra. It's a lot of, there's even tango there. So I'm sure that tango would be very popular in Brazil. And there's some Sibelius music for cello. His brother was a cellist, so he wrote that early female variations, which is partly like a sketch. It's not really finished, but very beautiful piece. And then he wrote the Malinconia, the big cello piano piece, which is performed a lot. Then he wrote the 2 beautiful pieces with orchestra called Cantique and Devotion. So Sibelius understood cello very well, but maybe in his time there was not like a leading cello soloist from Finland. So when he wrote those 2 pieces with orchestra, there's in the review it says that the cello was not quite heard. And you know, in those times, one used like the end pin was about like this, probably. Yeah. This was the end pin, and then you would like need to look like a very gentleman with big mustache, and you just. Thanks God, cello tradition has changed since then, and one could only think like what would happen if Sibelius would have like a great cello soloist in his time in Finland. What could he write? So it's always a kind of, you need both composers, you need performers, you need the whole package for music life, and we have had that. Not just performers or not just composers. Like if you look at Russia in the golden years, there was Prokofiev, there was Shostakovich, there were many good composers in that country when there was that golden age, like some years ago. And maybe if you can look at the earlier golden age when there was Tchaikovsky and Rubinstein and everybody, there was also like they suddenly came also great soloists.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, the case of Finland, where this whole package is together, and still nowadays, because you have now hundreds of wonderful cellists, and composers are actively writing all the time for the cello, and it's really quite interesting.
Yes, you're right.
Martti, Mayara, who has spent some time in Helsinki and who knows you, she she's asking, she's working on the sixth suite now, and but she says she has small hands, and it's hard for her, the stretching between the E's on the A and the D string.
In that famous,
the famous passage. How do you?
The Frankenstein passage, yeah. But she can just move to A string quite soon, I think, because
right.
I really matter. The people will not throw rotten tomatoes on you if you go. Maybe already there you can move to A string.
Right.
Because maybe just to start that thing, so that you have two strings and two voices, and then and anyway, the great mistake in this place that is very often done is that there's that horrible edition from 1950, this Wentzinger Bernreiter edition that should be burned. There is like written in brackets, there's written forte and piano, and forte and piano, and forte and piano, which makes it sound very horrible, that place. And also, if forget about that, because that's not from the manuscript. It's just in one of the copies that later anonymous copy, whatever is written, that kind of thing there. But it doesn't make any sense musically. Also, maybe can help to find the character of that particular place when you play it on a 4-string cello.
Right.
It's a kind of a lyrical thing. It's not an exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It can become like a very sporty, looks like gymnastic more than music. Suddenly, it's like first is beautiful Bach music, and then gymnastic for 25 seconds, and then again music. So it no matter what kind of hand. I think Sarabande is the more sort of a movement where it's kind of important to kind of try to find very good fingerings.
Mm-hmm.
And there, I think maybe omitting some notes, like if, for example, if one doesn't, maybe if one doesn't want to play all those notes, maybe to omit something,
mm-hmm.
to feel more comfortable. I think because Bach is all about like somehow being able to communicate the music. So if it becomes sort of cello gymnastic, it's not so nice. And Bach was a musician himself. He played several instruments, so he would immediately understand what we need with a 4-string cello.
Right. Well, thank you, Martti. This is a wonderful answer. Caio, who is a cellist here from Natal, he says that whenever he listens to your students, they have a very special quality in sound. So he asks advice, and how do you actually teach them to have the finesse of sound, or to develop sensibility with that, even in high people who already play very well?
Yes, well, I think when it comes to sound, it's always the bow hand that is the most important. There's no question about that. And I think training early on the bow hand, maybe the most important. And I find maybe in general, I don't know if people agree about this, but generally cellists these days tend to have a very high bow arm, which kind of like, first of all, it's not giving the best sound often, and then later during the life of a cellist, let's say, in an ideal case, cellists should play until we are like 80 or 85 or God knows how long. Also, a lot of cellists have this problem of this shoulder that it will be operated at some point. And I think to have this kind of like low, sort of relatively low arm and feeling of keeping the arm low, maybe also gives that kind of sound. I tend to sort of like that kind of string playing, like, let's say, Itzhak Perlman kind of bow arm, or Jascha Heifetz, or Rostropovich, or Kavakos, that I played a trio with for 10 years, and we discussed so much about this. And also he likes that like when we go to the second half of the bow, like when now it's a saraban, but that you can kind of go low. That is and I think the sweet spots in the bow are basically the frog and the tip. If you don't have a very good feeling in the bow change, then the sound will never be very good. I think it's that, like, and somehow it's not particularly easy to change the bow in the frog either, because you have to kind of be able do it very slowly and without any kind of, but if one has a very good bow change in the frog and very good bow change in the tip, it's kind of difficult to have bad sound. Take some effort to have a bad sound in the middle. Like you have a fantastic bow and then something, it doesn't work like that. But if you start the sound like that, what can you do in the middle? I mean, there's nothing to do. It's like lost. You lost the game. So it's all about those. So the first millimeters and the bow changes, and I think very healthy to somehow focus on that. And with
very nice
wood in the bow, the wood of the bow must come from Brazil.
Actually, from Lucas.
In Pernambuco, from the area near the sea, like Tours you used to have. That's kind of like also gives a nice sound. Tours, Persua, Granadam, this kind of Mare, Pajot. Oh, it's kind of nice for the sound too. It's coming from.
And I have to say, I was very impressed with the bow that you showed me from a Finnish bow maker.
Yes, Aino, he's very famous, and he just turned 90 years, and he has very beautiful book that he has been buying since 1960s already. Like always, when he found a good block of Pernambuco, he bought it. So he has a very nice wood still. And still makes today, he makes still bows. Under this kind of Corona time, he has made a lot of bows.
Oh.
And he made some Kittel copies. Which is very interesting also. He has also done 2 copies of my tour. That I have both of them.
Yeah, they're really beautiful. I was really impressed.
He's a wonderful master.
Mm-hmm.
Great, and also.
Martti, following on what you said, Caleb has asked more about finger contact with the bow and balance. How do you teach that, and what are your views?
Well, I think it's very good to train the fingers like early on, like use all these kind of exercises where you don't maybe play, but you just kind of like train your fingers, maybe even 2 fingers at a time, and sort of that you know your instrument. But in the end, of course, it's also kind of like forgetting that, because if you are just focusing on the fingers, it doesn't really give you the answer. Maybe like still mostly is the bigger groups of muscles that sort of drive the car, sort of. But the fingertips also do have like a role, and also in this, that because we are in like so many different places in the ball. Like when we are in the frog, of course, we need a finger, this kind of very good finger control. Also, like using maybe not using all the fingers the same way, like feel the individuality of the fingers, because it's not a good idea that like you have just like a bunch of fingers you just put on the bow, but every finger sort of knows its role, and especially those this pinky finger and the no-name finger are so important in cello playing. I find that training them early on maybe helps, but it's not really the answer. You cannot really go to Carnegie Hall and like play like with your fingers. It doesn't work like that. So then it's like still the bigger muscle groups that come into play, and maybe in general, the bigger the orchestra, the bigger the concerto, the more you need to just like, and it helps if you once learn those things. Then it kind of like saves your life in some situations. I find like more like that, but also depends which string you are. Like maybe A string, you kind of play more with the whole arm and the natural weight. But if you do C string like only with your weight of the arm, it's like maybe lacking focus, especially if you have a dark sounding cello. Maybe you need like some need to have like more sort of finger action, and depending on the acoustic also. Some acoustic, if you play in a church, it needs like another feeling. If you play Bach in a church, you don't like go like this, but you kind of like so you must be much more sort of aware of that kind of like articulation. So it's like I think bow hand together with the ear functions. Everything functions like basically the cello, bow, ear, and everything, the hand, everything functions together basically. We are all part of the same package. Should be like that. Ideally, it's not like, also the bow is not just playing the cello. It's also listening, I find. Like the bow, like, it's listening like to the cello. What do you want now? Maybe the cello. Want something like that. And if you press it a little bit for a while, maybe. Then you are nice to it for a while, and then you can go for it again. And that's also how music is composed. Is because music is also like that. It has that human quality. So I think everything is in the same package. We cannot really separate. Like, I don't like particularly this kind of attitude with the cello playing, that it's like you bring into molecules everything. Just like start to play like some kind of like a nerd or a robot, and then suddenly you are supposed to play something very romantic, and it doesn't really work like that. For me, it never worked like that, and I don't know. I feel more everything should be in the same, included in the same package together with music, which is of course more important than anything else that we talk about.
Actually, Martti, I really love the way you put it. There's lots of wisdom, because sometimes when students are trying to build their technique, they tend to concentrate too much on a few aspects, but they lose the context, that technique has to work in favor of music. Of course, you need to have it, and you touch also a subject that I find very interesting, which you said one must react to every situation. So if you play Bach in a church, your technique is different than if you play in a hall. And I guess that's a very important reflection for all the students and young professionals that are watching. Because sometimes people, they think they're going to learn one way of playing, and that's going to fit for every occasion, but it doesn't. It's not like that, right?
Of course not, and it depends with whom you play also, because I mean, as a cellist, we cannot make a huge career just playing solo. See the Bach and the solo sonatas what we have, we can not get very famous with that. So we have to also play concertos, we have to play sonatas, especially there's a huge repertoire of beautiful sonatas, trios, quartets, playing orchestra, being a solo cellist or something like that, being an all-round musician. And we have to react. We cannot just like, okay, I'm coming here from Finland, that's how I play, and you it doesn't work like it, just doesn't. And the greatest artists are like always reacting, even if you listen to like some violinists like who are so different, like Oistrakh and Stern playing Bach double concerto together. Like cannot be more different somehow than that, and they sound almost equal suddenly.
Yes.
But this great musicianship and great instrumentalism, that you are able to react to your partner. I believe that. And I don't believe this kind of dictatorial approach to anything. I don't think there is any kind of like, I'm right. I don't think this is the message of music. I don't think so.
And also you said something interesting, because playing chamber music means reacting, doesn't mean playing the same, because it's boring when everything is very homogeneous, right? When you said Oistrakh and Stern, nothing to do one with the other, but it just sounds great together.
Yes, that's right. And I think it's also like everyone sort of can be very inspired. Like let's say all cellists can be very inspired by great violinists. I think it's a wonderful thing to be inspired of. Like I was so lucky during my life to play with many of the really leading violinists of my time, and this is the greatest thing what happened to me. And if you look at Rostropovich, he played with Leonid Kogan in those years when he kind of formed that whatever he became famous for. And you can say the influence if you are not blind, and if you have ears, you can see the influence. And also be very inspired by great pianists. I was always very about this, listen to all the great pianists. I much rather listen to a piano concert than a cello concert, to be honest. Secretly, I love that, going to a great piano recital, oh my God. Or singers sometimes also, but singers, it's like another thing. But I think pianists in general are the greatest musicians, I think. For me, like personally. People ask me like, which Bach recording should I buy in order to switch? I mean, you should buy maybe Glenn Gould playing Bach, non-cellist. I mean, if I would have to tomorrow make a recording of all the Bach 6, I would like not sleep for a month. I mean, and then the result would be a disaster probably. And that's what they say even of Casals, very sort of like devoted to Bach, that his recording doesn't really represent what he could do with Bach, that he was so sort of like uptight with that recording, or that it didn't really work out. And I know from, like Misha Maisky, he told me when he made his first Bach recording, he just had a kind of microphones and the equipment on in that small church 24/7 for just go anytime he would feel like, he would go and play, and there would be no stop him. Okay, let's take another take, that note was out of tune or something like that. It's so complicated to do that, kind of like say what is the final word of that music. It's kind of like maybe impossible almost. So I think the great inspiration usually is coming from knowing a lot of music, and also knowing a lot about other forms of art, and being interested in other forms of art. Also very important, I feel.
It's actually, you're touching a point that I was going to ask you. So what's the importance of you know, for the cellist to have a wide musical culture, but also, you know, a relation with other art forms?
Oh my God, it's very important. Somehow, if you are like really good tenor, maybe this kind of Helden tenor, you sing those big Wagner roles, you don't need to much learn about anything. You just go and sing, and the conductor will help you with the rest. But cellist, we play often the bass line, and we kind of conduct like the great chamber music works like Schubert string quintet. You play the second cello often, and that's really, you need that kind of knowledge of harmony and counterpoint, and how to make a symphonic form stay together. And the cellist needs to be like a, we cannot be just like playing beautiful themes and looking good. That's also can somehow work, but in the end of the day, maybe I think we need to be very well educated, and also I happen to know a little bit of like how, of course, Yo-Yo Ma is also very famous for that he has a very big knowledge about a lot of things. And also Rostropovich was like a walking dictionary. I also have been in some museums where Rostropovich has been himself, like some kind of private museums. And the kind of questions that he could ask the people were so, they're still impressed about those questions. So it shows that that's kind of my idol type of cellist, who is kind of like, not just playing faster than anyone else, or more beautiful, or I don't, God knows what, but like showing that kind of understanding and knowledge, and then we can maybe pass that on to the next generation. I think also very important, because if you are that Helden tenor you probably will not teach anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you don't like your colleagues. You never meet them anyway. But cellists, we have all these cello festivals, and we love to hang out. And also, I wanted to invite these two wonderful cellists, Laura and Lucas, here. Otherwise, it feels unbelievable. These Corona times for cellists is so hard.
By the way, Martti, you have your own cello festival in Finland, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you heard about it. Yes. That's nice. Yes. We actually had that last year in February, and thanks God, we planned it from the beginning so that it will be every second year. So the next edition should be next March, 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and really hope that the situation will be much different by then. Also, it's like it just felt like the time was ripe for doing something like that. And Laura has been helping me a lot, and we are kind of like doing it as a team. She's basically, last edition she played Dutilleux concerto, and she played some solo pieces. Also this Omar Amor of Golizov in the big Kala concert, and then she organized everything. Also, that's like a kind of cellist thing. Cellist, we like to do everything a little bit, and it's wonderful to have people who are capable of doing that, because it's kind of like impossible to have a career as a cellist, just play those a few concertos every night somewhere, and that's it. It just doesn't work for many people at the same time.
Yeah, you're right. It's those profiles like Laura has are very important. Someone who can play really well, but can also organize, can get people together. I think they're really necessary these days.
Yes.
So Laura and Lucas should be ready for next year, because they will receive quite a lot of Brazilian students in their houses for your festival. You know?
That would be so nice to bring that kind of like a group. We had last Cello Fest, we had a big group from Portugal who came, and they were absolutely wonderful, and there was half-meter snow when the Cello Fest started.
Nice.
I'm excited. I've never seen such a thing. I guess in Brazil, the kind of amount of snow is also quite sort of small in general. I didn't see too much snow in Brazil. Like to see that there is a lot of snow and almost no coronavirus next year, I hope.
Yes, this would be really wonderful to have the Brazilian cellists there. We'll work on that.
Yes, and Lucas already can tell them what to do and what not to do in Helsinki. He can explain.
I absolutely love Helsinki. It's really a great town, especially the old part where you live. It's really a charming place. And yeah. I really miss the cold water fish from Finland. You know, this is just something else.
Yes, it's altogether a different kind of fish, and you also prepare it a little bit differently. Finnish fish, and yes, also for classical music, I have said it many times that it's so condensed. Like in the center of Helsinki, there are all these orchestras and a lot of musicians, composers, conductors. It's a kind of like a small-scale Silicon Valley for classical music, because everything is there. You can really feel it, and all the generations, young and old, all together, like working for the same goal. So it's not so bad, actually, to be honest. I think for a small country like Finland, able to manage that. We have this Sibelius Academy building, which is also the big